Hello everyone, Sebastian here. Welcome to the mandatory DevLog 0 for my new project Lords of War. Lords of War will be a turn-based strategy game set in the gritty but also heroic fantasy world filled to the brim with magical creatures and extraordinary heroes. Sounds like a good elevator pitch, right? In a more boring terms, Lords of War will be a recreation of the game Warlords 3 Reign of Heroes, equally fantastic turn-based strategy game that came out in 1997. More specifically, I'll be basing my game on its standalone expansion that came out a year later, Warlords Rising, from which gameplay you see right now on the screen. No matter Reign of Heroes or Warlords Rising, Warlords 3 is a very complex game with tons of units and features. I sure have a lot to do, so let's boot up MicroStudio and let's get started. For those who don't know, Warlords 3 is what I would, by today's standards, call a grand strategy game light, as it focuses on micro-strategy and, admittedly simple, diplomacy, while battles are calculated automatically. It's not on the level of complexity of Europe Universalis, of course, but it came out 4 years before the first EU game. I decided to remake it for two reasons. First, it's one of my personal favorites of all time, and second, it deserves far more recognition than it gets. Warlords 3 had a bad luck of being released right between Heroes of Might and Magic 2 and 3, and since Grand Strategy game label did not exist yet, it was just that war's fantasy turn strategy. Now, despite being relatively simple in comparison with today's grand strategies, Warlords 3 is still a very complex game to be made by a single developer. That's why before I actually dive into MicroStudio's IDE, I decided to do some planning. For that, I'll be using Obsidian. It's basically a note-taking app which is supposed to help with creating and visualizing connections between ideas. I personally don't like using full-blown project management tools like Trello and the like for my personal projects. I want to try out something more freeform that would just help me to manage the chaos of game design. I never used Obsidian before, so I expect some bumps along the way, but hopefully it will work well for me. First step I wanted to tackle is to decide which features from the original game I want to keep and which one will need to be scrapped. Aside, a full remake for Warlords 3 would be a huge effort for a single developer, and I need to cut my corners in quite a few places. First cuts are already in the main menu where the campaigns just need to go. Creating a story for a military campaign is way out of scope for Lords of War. Second game mode is Scenario, and this will be Acts 2, but at least this time I will have a replacement. Instead of scenarios, Lords of War will have skirmish maps. Pre-made free-for-all maps where players can select their armies and play it out as is. The main difference is that skirmish maps, again, don't need story, but also they don't necessarily rely on non-standard victory conditions, which are more common in scenario game modes. A single game of Lords of War will finish when there is only just one lord left. Random map generation. Creating good random map generator is not a trivial problem for sure, but at the same time I think creating one that is just good enough would be really good for game replayability. So that will be likely but not certain feature in Lords of War. So that's the main menu done, let's dig in a little deeper. There can be up to 8 lords in each game. They can be controlled by players or by computer. There are 3 difficulty levels, but I think for Lords of War just one will be enough. Warlords 3 comes with a bunch of pre-made factions, but there is also a faction builder, which I really want to include in my game. There are few macro decisions to make when building a faction, and there will be great guidelines on what features I want to include. Most importantly, there is a very long list of units that is available in the game, and I'm really on the fence with this. Adding more unit types isn't that complicated in itself, but it comes with the need for more graphics, and that's significant since I'm planning on making all the assets for the game myself. You can treat it as a warning that Lords of War will likely look and sound really bad, like really bad, so you have been warned. And finally, the game proper. I think a good way to approach this analysis is to go top to bottom. So here are all the interactions with the game that player can perform, which I would like to replicate in Lords of War. Player only see a portion of the whole game map, so I'll need some sort of camera system with edge scrolling and the option to programmatically center the view on the target. Player can select units, planning units movement and then executing movement order. Order movement can persist in between turns, creating groups with up to 8 units that move as one, ordering units to attack other units, seeing combat screen, attacking cities which can hold up to 32 units, occupy, plunder or raise a conquered city, hire heroes, leveling up heroes and selecting level up rewards like stats increase, passive skills and spells, using skills and casting spells known by the selected hero, exploring ruins with a hero unit, gaining items, accepting quests, establishing alliances with other players, producing new units in cities, buying ability to produce new units, upgrading cities for better defense bonuses, and finally winning a game by defeating all enemies. Quite a list, I must admit. This won't be a short project, that's for sure. Estimating a length of the game development project is notoriously difficult, and especially since I intend to do all assets myself, I have no clue how long could it take. I would hope I will finish it in a year, though time will tell how wrong I was, I guess. Newest version of Lords of War will be available on GitHub, and I will update the project on MicroStudio website whenever I have a good milestone. Well then, let's get started.